Happy Thursday and welcome to today's very special and last of 2025 episode of Veeam Tech Bites. I'm Rick Vanover, the Ricktron, coming to you live from Central Ohio, and I'm joined by one of my colleagues here on the Veeam product team, Matt Slotten. It's good to have you back on the show.
Rick, always a pleasure. And yes, I'm glad we got it in under the wire before the end of the year. Got some good stuff to share, but also just always a good time before the holidays to hang out with you.
Absolutely. And we've got a great topic here for y'all today. So Matt is based in, let's just call it North Georgia. And we also have our producer, Felicia, tuning in from the DFW Metroplex, as well as other producers, Jeffrey live from the Barncade and Lady Megatron, friend of the show. She's been on as well, tuning in to help bring this show to you. So we're ready for this one. And we're going to talk Veeam Kasten. So Veeam's Kubernetes backup product right now. Matt, I know you and your colleagues specialize a lot in getting these milestones out to market for this product. But before we get into what's new, let's just introduce what is Veeam Kasten.
Great question. And yep, you've set me up well. It is our cloud native data protection solution. Essentially, if it's a cloud native application or a KubeVirt VM, Kasten can protect it, can move it, ensure that it's safe from ransomware. And we are happily an industry leader, which we'll talk about here a little bit too, as you know, per the Veeam ilk, per the green industry leading ilk.
Indeed, indeed. In fact, one thing I should add, as I mentioned, Matt is in North Georgia. We've got two people on already. Morgan is joining from the Netherlands, and we got to be careful. We got a good one on. We've got Jeff tuning in from, let's just call it Canada. And let us know in the stream or the chat that you're on where you're tuning in from. I know our producers love seeing that. And we've got Nufal tuning in from Dubai. Wow, no better place to be. What is that, midnight for you? Holy buckets. Thanks for joining. But, one thing I want to highlight, Matt, is you've really combined two things here. And I want to hit on modern virtualization, which is near and dear to my heart. I've come to love this type of platform virtualization in general. But conditions in the market may have made organizations rethink how they are running these types of workloads. And so I love that you have modern virtualization in here because it's absolutely an alternative for organizations today. So when people are reassessing their platform investments, I think Kubernetes deserves a good look. And I really am excited because the Veeam Kasten product is truly already there for enterprise resiliency of this platform, cloud native Kubernetes platforms. And so we're coming up on a really big milestone with 8.5. And when we were prepping, Matt said, well, there's a lot to talk about, but I'm going to focus on a few things. And so, Matt, let's get started with some of the first highlights you have.
Beautiful. Well, before we jump into 8.5, I definitely need to do the pat on the back. We're very proud of this. This came out on Friday. For those that have not seen the GigaOM radar, this is released once a year. It's a very well-respected analyst that we like to work closely with, and we are very happy to now claim 6 years in a row running as a leader and outperformer from a product perspective. Rick, you alluded to it in terms of kind of product maturity, our ability to already protect KubeVirt workloads. We actually have done that since 2022 at the behest of the Navy. We've since been adding more and more capabilities, making it more enterprise ready. But yes, just very, very proud of our position here on the GigaOM radar. And we're closing in on that center of that diagram, which is where you want to be.
Yeah, one thing I'm going to add to this is one of the things that my team does is interact with a lot of others across the company, interact with the analyst firms. I see a lot. And one thing I want to highlight about GigaOM, they are a very practitioner-heavy analyst firm. So yes, we're happy with the result, but I think everyone looking at this should also understand that this firm really gets it. There's some outstanding experts in the space, and I just tested it right now. This QR code will take you right to the veeam.com page where you can download a free copy of this report. Really good perspective here. And, especially if you're, honestly being brave and suggesting to your decision makers that, hey, maybe we should consider a Kubernetes platform. And if I'm a manager, first thing I'm going to do is say, what happens if it messes up? Well, here we go. Here's a validated kind of above the power line asset that you can take to confidently have those conversations about decisions with your management. So great job, Kasten team, on this milestone.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Yeah, I'm definitely excited as we march into 2026. We're going to make it 7 in a row. That's the goal, and on and on from there. But yeah, a lot of good things on the horizon with our 8.5 release. I know we've announced 8.5. The actual code release is forthcoming. We're going to all enjoy the holidays, but shortly after the holidays, you can expect 8.5 to be out, available, ready to try, ready to upgrade to. So I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into some of the new capabilities we're introducing. So I'm just diving right into, by the way, just conscious of time. So, obviously, if I'm going too fast, as I'm apt to do, Rick, please slow me down. I do sometimes suck up all the wind in the room. But let's dive in terms of file level recovery. So for those that have been following along, this is something that we actually announced in 8.0. But we used for original FLR within Kasten, we were leaning heavily on our friends from the Veeam data platform. So VBR essentially was the conduit by which we could perform file level recovery for VM workloads specifically. We are proud to announce with 8.5 for those customers that are either not using VBR or looking to replatform everything and want to do everything in a cloud native or Kubernetes native way. We now have this built in directly into Kasten as well as directly into Kubernetes. So no longer will you necessarily have to launch a VBR console. These are all CRDs that you can spin up. It's pretty straightforward in terms of how we've done this. It allows you to essentially mount a restore point, much like the way that VBR does it. From the catalog, you can actually choose multiple restore points if you like. It essentially spins up a pod. That pod can act as a bridge for an SFTP session, and you can either copy a file directly back to the source, or you can use SFTP to bring it back to your local machine. All to say, pretty handy here in case, again, you don't have VBR or don't wish to deploy VBR. Very useful there for getting specific files back. And not only is it relevant for VMs, it's also applicable for containerized workloads as well. So if you've got persistent volumes attached to your cloud native application, you can use this FLR capability. It supports both file system volumes as well as a number of block mode disk formats. And it just makes it much easier to restore single files from either deletion, corruption, or just to get it, maybe you just missed that teddy bear photo you had and you want to get that back quickly. So we don't need to restore entire VMs or disks to do so. We can now just do that using our nice inbuilt Kubernetes native way to do it.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about this flow here is that enhancing the file type of recovery is really powerful because a lot of, Jeff is on the call. I got to watch what I say because this guy knows this stuff. But, a lot of times when people design something, there's just this mindset of wholesale destroy and rebuild. It's a capability of the platform. I get that. But all of I need to get is that. This is actually a really interesting discovery technique as well as recovery. And what I also like about this is the repository, relatively new. We also support now the Veeam Data Cloud Vault Target, which is a great way, especially if you're wanting to standardize across your state with other parts of Veeam as well as more versatile stuff, object storage, NFS, SMB, and piece of trivia, Matt. The Kasten product was the first one in the Veeam portfolio to support Google Cloud immutability.
Mm-hmm.
That'll win you a bet at a bar, by the way.
It will.
A free drink at a bar, I should say. Yeah.
Or a very nuanced trivia question.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and this is essentially walking through. I'm going to just fire through this because we've seen the end result. All to say, though, cloud native ways to do it and using our familiar tool of SFTP. So moving right ahead, just again, forging through this, there's a lot to cover. So I want to make sure we have time to cover kind of all these new capabilities we're introducing in 8.5. Another one is restore point validation. So this is an interesting one. This was derived both kind of internally as we thought this would be a good idea, but we also got this request from a number of customers as well, which has kind of amalgamated to this feature that we've released, which is particularly useful if you can't use immutability. So if you're using an object store that either doesn't support immutability, or you're using NFS, or if you're using SMB, which is a newly supported, or Samba, or a small messaging block that's a newly supported export location. Wow, struggling with words today. We can now support the ability to actually validate your restore point prior to restoring. So what does this mean? It means if we don't have immutability, we can at least do some high-level smoke tests to make sure that, do hashes and signatures match? Is the repository that what we expect it to be? Or do we need to go look and see, hey, maybe we have a bad disk, or maybe we're missing some files? So it really just helps, ensure that you've got a good, solid recovery point, and really helps kind of drive confidence for those situations where you can't leverage things like object locked or immutability, whether it's Google storage or Azure or S3 compatible or S3 itself.
Well, this is really fascinating in a way, Matt, because I'm going to ask a potentially stupid question. I have to think that this is a differentiator or an industry first or otherwise a very unique capability for this type of platform. This is actually really awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. As far as we're aware, there are no competitors that are doing this today.
Yeah.
And yeah, the nice thing about this too is, again, this is done within Kasten, which is cloud native itself, which means everything we do in Kasten can be orchestrated or automated using things like Argo CD or just CRDs within Kubernetes, which means that as part of your CI/CD pipeline, you could actually do a validation check to make sure, prior to a restore or prior to a backup, that your restore points are intact and what you expect. And we also have there's the quick restore point validation, which is just a quick check of checksums, or we can do a full data checksum of the entire repository to make sure everything is intact there. So yeah, absolutely right. This is a key differentiator for us. I definitely want to encourage for those customers that are interested in this, please give us feedback. So like I said, this was kind of an amalgamation of some requests from the field and kind of what we thought would be useful. But we're interested to see, how this is leveraged actually out in the wild. There's lots of room to improve upon this as well. So stay tuned. I guess, we're already thinking things around automation or maybe things prior to restore. Maybe we just build this in as a checkbox that says, hey, let's perform restore point validation before we actually restore, rather than having to manually run it or create a CRD or automate it yourself.
Speaking of checks, I just got word from the producers that we want to check in with the map. I've seen some good entries here. We've got, let's see, Canada, Kentucky, California, Florida. Welcome on the show again. Will let us know in the chat on the stream. Felicia's looking at all the things. Oh boy, I gotta look. I gotta talk without looking. Let's see. We got UK. We've got Northern Ireland included, and we have Ireland. I don't know if that means that we've got both on there. We've got Portugal. We've got Turkey, and then in the Middle East. Let's see. I did see Dubai, so I already have that one fed to me. Still Turkey, and I think that would be Iran. I'm not sure. And then, Dubai would be UAE. Sorry. So yeah, thank you. I shouldn't just say the city, the country as well. But yeah, thank you for the letting us know where y'all, the collective y'all, are tuning in from. This is great. All right, Matt, walk us through some of the next new highlights of 8.5.
For sure. Yeah. So let me punch through this. So, okay, this is the big one, I guess, talking about KubeVirt VM. So, we were talking about this earlier. It's something that Kasten has supported really since 2022 in some form or another. Really kind of KubeVirt, it started somewhat as a nice to have kind of side idea, right? In that maybe we have a Kubernetes platform, we've got a bunch of cloud native apps, but maybe one workload needs to run as a VM. And KubeVirt was a great solution for that. It's based on well-known technologies like KVM and KEMU and libvirt, just kind of packaged in a different way. But as you mentioned or alluded to earlier, there's been some industry shakeups. So there's been, an impetus or industry kind of milestone that might trigger a harder look at our current platforms and maybe drive some consideration around future platforms, either to change vendors or also potentially future-proof ourselves. So really, suddenly, KubeVirt has become a very important workload on Kubernetes, as you can imagine. And it's also, conveniently enough, I guess, from a VM perspective, is there are fewer, more persistent workloads than a VM. So it's something we sometimes hear at conferences like KubeCon, where somebody approaches and say, hey, Kubernetes Kubernetes is stateless. Why do I need backup? There's a whole reason why you still might need that, even if your cluster is stateless, but we won't get into that. But if you're running KubeVirt VMs, you just can point to a VM and say, you're probably going to want to protect those disks. You're probably protecting them today. You're probably going to want to protect them tomorrow when they're on KubeVirt or OpenShift virtualization. And to date, again, we've been able to do this because we are a cloud native data protection solution, and these are cloud native resources. We could protect it, but it can be a little awkward, right? So a concept that appears in Kubernetes that doesn't necessarily always appear in kind of traditional virtualization infrastructure is a namespace. So Kubernetes, some people live and die by namespaces, and that these are great ways to divide up resources and permissions and clusters. And it's also a great way to group applications. So typically what you would see, I guess, or really kind of the best practice is to group a singular application, usually comprised of multiple config maps and containers and deployments or stateful sets in one namespace, and then Kasten would look at that namespace, and you could, default option is protect all the resources in that namespace. So we could leverage that capability for KubeVirt VMs, but as you can imagine, for customers that were transitioning away from maybe a legacy virtualization platform, we'll leave it at that, there was a tendency to just kind of drop all these VMs in one namespace, right? Because you're not really familiar with namespaces. I just need to get these VMs into Kubernetes. Let's just put everything kind of into one bucket. That obviously can be a little bit tough when it comes to backup when we're looking at namespace fenced backup, because if we suddenly have 300 VMs in all in one namespace, we're now having to back up all of those VMs together, and if one of them fails, we potentially have a failure of our backup, which we don't want. So we were leaning heavily, and actually still technically today lean heavily on that app boundary. This is why kind of to date we've generally recommended, if possible, to do a single namespace per VM, or at least a very small subset of VMs in a single namespace, maybe grouped again, kind of like one application, your database, maybe your front end VMs all in one namespace. But again, this as we see more adoption, it's sometimes hard to accommodate that as we migrate and are trying to quickly move off platforms. And yeah, we talk about here in terms of grouping options and network policy and all these other kind of things that get tied into our KubeVirt VMs that we probably need to protect. And it can get very complicated very quickly. So, we've got things like network attachment definitions. That's how we actually define how our VMs attach to a network. But that's often shared across multiple VMs. So if we protect the VM, we need to make sure we're protecting that network attachment definition. Sometimes that's a little bit trickier. It's easier said than done. It is possible again today with Kasten. It's just not super user-friendly to do it. So we recognize this. We see that, we really should make this, given the adoption of KubeVirt and what we're seeing in the market, we really need to make this easier just on our customers, on our people, anyone considering moving to KubeVirt. Things like if we're doing things on namespaces, you can imagine difficult to do per VM selection. You could do things with filters. We've got this very kind of advanced filtering and choose resources specific to a VM. But again, as you can imagine, it quickly gets a little unruly. And then we have one backup action for all VMs, which means if one VM fails and we're trying to back up 10 in a given time, that means our entire backup fails. That's no bueno, right? So we've all seen an occasional hiccup or one VM, and we don't want one apple to spoil the bunch, I guess, to steal that old saying. So we have a larger failure domain when we're doing that. So again, just recognizing that there's some limitations here for this namespace-based backup.
And one thing I want to highlight here, Matt, I think is also, I'm on a journey. I'm learning as well. I learned so much, but KubeVirt in general, really the kind of the big market share leader, I'd say, would have to be Red Hat OpenShift virtualization that supports KubeVirt. But there's also, is it Talos or Talos? I'm not sure. Omni, there's a whole bunch of these other ones. In fact, shout out to Jeff Burke a year ago wrote up something on the Veeam Community Hub about in Kubernetes Corner about this, right? So this can be enterprise, Red Hat OpenShift virtualization style, or it can be kind of a Linux distro just for this that you can run anywhere. So it's kind of important to note it's very versatile. It doesn't really prescribe you to any specific platform.
Absolutely, yeah, great point. And yeah, definitely don't want to leave our good friends at SUSE out of the mix as well.
Yep.
They've got a great solution with their SUSE virtualization. And to your point, though, I guess in terms of enterprise adoption, we're seeing a slight preference towards Red Hat, but that's not to say that we're not seeing traction among the Taluses and the SUSEs and the other kind of smaller
Omni. Yeah,
distributions.
there's a bunch of them out
Which is,
there.
I think that Omni and Talus, I think, are tied somehow.
There you
Yeah.
go.
But so all to say, we recognize this kind of awkwardness when it comes to protecting this. We recognize that maybe application centricity doesn't always apply nicely to VM backup, right? So we are now taking a more VM centric approach. This should hopefully be more familiar for our VM admins that are moving over to a KubeVirt platform. Where now we can actually perform VM-based policy and VM-based backup and restore. So I know this seems a bit like table stakes if you're coming from VBR. VBR has been able to do this basically since its inception, but these are different products and different architectures, right? So VBR is purpose-built for virtualization primarily, whereas Kasten was primarily built for application, cloud-native applications. So we've had to do a little bit of rejigging, and we essentially are doing the heavy lifting for you, right? So in terms of mapping those resources, you don't need to do filters now anymore. We can essentially kind of do that behind the scenes for you, and it's easy now within the UI of just selecting kind of which VMs you want to protect with which policy, and just simply running that policy, and makes it much easier, much more fun, I guess, than having to define all those filter policies. And now we can go across namespaces. These don't all have to be in the same namespace, and then we, like I said, automatically discover the resources and dependencies there, and then we can do those per VM backup. So now a single VM is not going to break up your entire backup or your entire policy. If it fails, we can go back and retry in that one failed VM, but our other VMs will be safely protected. And again, pretty handy here. Worth mentioning that, and it's highlighted in this screenshot, if you add additional VMs, you will have to manually go back and add them to the policy. Again, there's some roadmap here to potentially automate some of this. But you can see here, maybe VM1 in this case is a web server that I don't care about, or maybe it's a dev server, or maybe I have that in a different backup policy. I can just get very granular in terms of choosing which VMs I want to protect and with what kind of SLAs I want to tie to that policy. So what does this look like? What does this mapping look like? So this essentially, to kind of simplify it, but also give you some lot of blue icons here for KubeVirt. Essentially, we define VMs as a set of Kubernetes resources, right? So we have a virtual machine object. We've got a PVC or persistent volume claim, sometimes multiple PVCs if you've got multiple disks, which then tie to volumes. We also have things like hot plug volumes. So that was added in OpenShift virtualization and KubeVirt in general. Well, I know OpenShift added it relatively recently. And then we also have, shared resources, right? Remember things like network attachment definitions. We've got maybe instant types over there that aren't namespaced. We essentially can map this now with Kasten and essentially build out a tree in the background, right? So when I select maybe VM1, I know that I need to grab these specific resources for VM1. I can also see that maybe, hey, this template uses this VLAN. So essentially in the background, we're mapping these all for you. You're not having to go through and filter things and look for specific tags or anything like that. And this is what allows us to do one backup action per VM. And as a result, have one restore point per VM as well. So there's our nice mapping there grouped together. We've got our VM1, VM2, VM3, and we're grabbing all of our specific resources, our network attachment definitions. And you can see here a great example, VM1 and VM, well, that's a typo, I need to fix that. But VM1 and VM3 both use VLAN1 network attachment definition. So they both capture that network attachment definition as part of their backup. So that way, when I go to restore, everything is compartmentalized. It's a nice atomic unit that I can restore to. I don't have to go and kind of grab another component to restore. It's all just one fell swoop, and up we go. We're running again. So a bit of a busy slide there. Rick, does this make sense? Hopefully I'm
Yeah, it does. In fact, I have the file open, and you're smart because you made it read only, because I was going to go fix it for you.
Oh, thank you.
With the synchronization, but no, it's read only, so I can't do it. So no, I'm following along really good. Couple points here I want to bring up is that when we also think about just this mode, I should also highlight what you mentioned, roadmap, and that made me think. At the VeeamON Global Launch event, when Anton Gostev was talking about some of the enhancements for Veeam Data Platform. It's also interesting to note that KubeVirt supported containerized platforms will also have kind of a wizardized, is that a word, way in Veeam Data Platform. And I think that's also something to get super excited about, because I think sometimes it depends on who you are. If you're like a backup of all things person, that might be really interesting. If you're, deep in the trenches of the Kubernetes deployment with those app teams, this way will be probably the better path. And I think that it's above all super important to know that any way you consume Veeam, there's an option, right? Any way you use it, whoever you are, keeping this good data safe from bad things. So I'm really stoked about this. This is awesome.
It's a great point. Yeah, and we're so excited to be working with Anton and the VDP team to build in that KubeVirt support. You can tell, from what we're building in the product, we obviously want to make VM backup easier, but we also recognize from a Kasten product perspective, we're never going to be able to rebuild all of the beautiful things that have been built into VDP and VBR, that, things like the file over recovery wizard, things, that in terms of multiple export and replication capabilities. So why reinvent the wheel, right? So for those customers that are simply looking to go from maybe a vSphere to an OpenShift virtualization, but already are using VBR today, by introducing that capability into Veeam Data Platform, there's no need to have to shift among different products. However, obviously, if you're looking at more application centricity, or you plan to modernize into cloud native workloads, that maybe Kasten might be a better approach, because it can kind of bridge that gap. And then as you move workloads over into those containerized architectures, you're using the same tool there. It's almost somewhat future proof there. So it's kind of choose your own adventure. We'll definitely have some better guidance too as we progress towards that, for customers, for the field, for everyone watching, to help kind of guide you and give you the best possible option. But yeah, absolutely agree, Rick. No matter what, I guess the message here is we've got your back at Veeam, no matter which path you choose.
Got it. So a couple points here. First of all, Matt, how does someone get started? If they're on a journey, it's like, okay, I'm using Kubernetes, maybe with or without KubeVirt, by the way. This is a lot of what's new, but just standard Kubernetes orchestration platforms, we're good to go there. One kind of thought here is, how does someone get started if they want to pursue protecting their Kubernetes environments?
Great question. And yeah, I think the heart we were talking before we kicked off, the hardest part is just starting with a Kubernetes cluster, right? So deploying, and I'm going to steal Michael Cade's thunder. I don't know if he's watching, but yeah, I'm going to totally steal what he says. Is, Kubernetes is hard enough. We don't need to make Kubernetes data protection even harder. So really the goal here is let's get a Kubernetes cluster up quickly. That could be as simple as just, swipe out a credit card and going to Google, or in the free sense, using something like micro K8s, or if you've got a single server, you can deploy a single node cluster. Lots of options to get started there. Definitely check out, SUSE, Red Hat, all of the big vendors, Talus, have some great guides to kind of get started to get a Kubernetes cluster up. But yeah, to your point, the fastest way would be micro K8s. That's how the first kind of Kubernetes cluster, it's a single node thing that's deployed on your own workstation. That's how I got started with it. But once you have that up, you can then easily install Kasten using cloud native tooling, right? So if you've decided to go the OpenShift route, so let's say maybe you've grabbed a ROSA cluster or created a single node OpenShift cluster, we have an operator. So you just go to the operator hub, not club, and grab the Kasten operator, and it will go ahead and basically do the lifting for you. It'll install Kasten, get you going in a matter of minutes. Alternatively, if you're using something like micro K8s or some other distribution of Kubernetes, you can just use Helm, which is an industry standard tool for deploying Kubernetes or cloud native applications. The nice thing about it is when you deploy Kasten, we ship all Kasten instances, all images have a free, fully featured license for up to 5 nodes. It's fun saying that 5 times fast. But yeah, very, very easy to get started. And essentially, if you've got fewer than 5 nodes, go nuts, right? You can use all of the capabilities of Kasten. We don't limit or gate any of those capabilities. I will say, because we've had, as you can imagine, there's some interesting incentives. We have found some people that have multiple 5-node clusters. That is technically against the rules of the license. So it's great to get started, great to try out. If you're an enterprise, you can do up to 5 nodes. That's across your enterprise. Obviously, if you want support or need to do more than 5 nodes, then we can start talking about maybe doing an enterprise agreement or a per worker node licensing purchase.
Yeah, and then another great resource, you mentioned micro K8, great platform to start with. I highly recommend everyone go over to community.veeam.com. There's Kubernetes Corner. If you want to learn this stuff, there's no excuse. Everything's there. And Micro K8s is covered. Jeff Burke, one of the attendees, shares a lot of great stuff. And 2 shout outs. Abu Ibrahim from Malaysia. It's got to be midnight 30. Thanks for joining. And then Grant Gibson, Double G, my man. Thanks for tuning in, and nice to see you again here. I remember you. Gave you the shout out on LinkedIn as well. Hey, Matt, thank you so much for joining us here today on Tech Bites.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure, and looking forward to the next one.
All right, I got to give another end of year big thanks to our producers, Jeffrey from the Barncade, Lady Megatron here in Central Ohio, as well as Felicia, our producer, and we got Super Sneaky Thomas as well, piping us information in on this show. I couldn't do it without them, and as well, Tyler and Matt on the other show, as well as the Veeam 100 show. These producers work so hard to bring this fantastic content to you. Nothing to push out for the rest of the year. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great 2026, and we will see you next time on Tech Bites.